Forecast gold standard, and I would like to thank each and every one of you as we have crossed the 1 million views in the last 28 days and 7 million views all time on this channel. And this is a science and fact-based weather forecasting and snowfall predicting, and that's why we're the gold standard here on November the 18th, 2024. And one of the things, we don't use clickbait, we don't use hype to get you to come to the station. We use facts and science to make a factual forecast with the physical drivers of the atmosphere to try to forecast the snowfall and forecast the upcoming weather patterns. And something we've been talking about with the negative EPO, the negative WPO, and a neutral to slightly positive TNA that is going to start to happen here. And we've been forecasting it between the 18th and 20th. It would start to flip, and it would allow cold air to build up in northwest Canada and leak into the Pacific Northwest and the upper Midwest. And if you've noticed the last few days, we've been talking about that, the Climate Prediction Center, 6 to 10, and then what was the 8 to 14, when it became the 6 to 10, would start to be dramatically cooler as we head into Thanksgiving week and the weekend, or into the 1st of December, with the physical drivers of the atmosphere at play. And you can now see the 6 to 10 day forecast is getting noticeably cooler than it was yesterday, as we have much below normal temperatures forecasted in the upper Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, and then starting to leak in days 8, 9, and 10 of the period. To start the period, day 6 and 7, it's going to be mild, but to end the period closer to the 28th, it's going to start to get below normal. And you can see that now as the probabilities of below normal, if we look down here, are some 50 to 70% up here in Montana, northern Washington, and central and western North Dakota. And then the equal chance is pushing and pushing as the cold air starts to push and the upper atmosphere starts to change, and the winds start to come out of the northwest or out of Canada in the upper atmosphere, and it can push the colder air that's building in western Canada and northwest Canada down into the upper Midwest and then into the Great Lakes and in earnest here across the Michigan. And you can see the 6 to 10 day precipitation. It's going to get awfully wet again, and that's traditional with the La Nina or very weak La Nina year. And then if we look at the 8 to 14, look at the noticeable change now. December 26th to December 2nd now, you can see now the intrusion of a big, maybe the first Arctic air mass of the season, maybe actually going to be coming down here as we end November and start December. And just on cue of meteorological first day of winter, December 1st, we could have our first Canadian air mass, at least, maybe even an Arctic air mass, come down out of Canada. And again, you see above normal precipitation across the Great Lakes, anywhere from a 40 to a 50% chance of above normal. And then this period, the 25th, 26th, 27th, might be near normal to slightly above. But as we get into the last couple of days in November, Thanksgiving and on, we look to be going below normal. And if we take a look at what our forecast, using a negative, a very deep negative Pacific decadal oscillation, a warm and Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, and a very weak developing La Nina, our analog package using the years of 1916, 09, 50, 55, 56, 05, 07, 08, 11, 20, 20, 21, 22, 23, 54, 64, 71, 74, 83, 84, and 2000 gets you like this. But this is using the long-term averages from 1895 to 2000. And as we do know, coming out of the Little Ice Age back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the climate was much cooler as we were coming out of that Little Ice Age. In the last 25 years, 30 years have been much warmer. So if we look at, and I think this is a very good December forecast, but if we use the base date of the current climate that they use to dictate above or below normal averages, they use the recent 30-year mean from 1991 to 2000, you can see we're at normal to maybe a half degree above normal using the 1895 to 2000. But if we switch to the current base date, 1991 to 2020, you can see it shows one of the colder Decembers we've had in maybe the last 10 years going to be coming up here as the pattern starts to change, and the fun and games and exciting snowfall predicting and outdoor activities with the snow. If you're a plow service, if you're a skier, an ice fisherman, you would like to see a cooler below normal start to December to try to get some ice building up and some snowpack down. And when you get a snowpack early in the season, it can help blunt or negate some of the warming that may take place as the pattern flips and wobbles. And I think we're going to have big swings of below normal and above normal temperatures as we get into January and February. But it can help mitigate that if we can get a nice snowpack, get the lakes frozen, and build the deep snowpack in the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. It can help to blunt or shunt and mitigate the warm-ups that will happen later on in the winter season, as I expect the core of the cold air in January and February to be in the upper Midwest and in central and western Canada and as far east as the western Great Lakes. But this could be a fun and exciting December coming up here. And this is something we've been outlining since late October, where we showed you it was going to be a warm November and then cooling towards the last third of November. And we had a warm November forecast, and we will be putting out our temperature forecast for December in the next 5 days. And we'll outline that, and it's going to be significantly cooler than what our November forecast was, and it lined up beautifully, and I believe our analogs are lining up beautifully, and you can see that's lining up nicely now with the Climate Prediction Center as we've been forecasting, with the major teleconnections flipping into their bullish or cold phases for the central and eastern part of the country. It's now starting to show up on the models, and is now starting to be forecasted, something that we've been alluding to you for the last 7 to 10 days now by the Climate Prediction Center. And if we go into looking at our teleconnections, I'm having a little brain fart where these are at. There we go. We got to get out of there. We got to get into here and go into our chart. Go into our teleconnections, and we have the European, because I believe the European, and it is the best skilled score out there, is the European. And if we go and look at the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, look how negative that's getting. You can see here, we've been forecasting from the 18th to 20th it would turn negative, right? And you can see the 18th is on the left, and you can see it's still positive, moderately positive. But over the next 4 to 5 days, by the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, it's going to be deeply negative. And a deeply negative Eastern Pacific Oscillation would argue for the cold air that's been building and it is building in Western and Central Canada to push into the upper Midwest and then eventually into the Great Lakes. And you can see the better part of the period now, all the way through the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of December. Of course, that's going to keep going. Excuse this. We got to put do not disturb on. I forgot to do that, or we're going to keep getting those updates up there. But you can see it continues to be deeply negative from about the 20th of the month all the way through the 3rd of December. And that's very bullish and a sign for cold air. And then if we look at the WPO is now negative, and it's going to continue to go negative, just as we forecasted from the 18th to the 20th, it would start to go negative. And if we look back a few days ago where the WPO was, you can see how positive it's been. Look at that, going back into the future through all November. See, this is October 31st on the left side of the screen. You can see how the left side of the screen, the first dot, is the current time frame, and then you go to the right, which is what it was forecasting into the future. And you can see from October 30th through the whole month of November, it was strongly to moderately positive. And I had a southwest flow aloft into the Great Lakes off the Pacific, which kept it very, very warm. But we were telling you now it was going to forecast it to go negative. And now if we look at where it's currently at, it is negative. It's about 1.5 standard deviations below normal. So it is negative now, and it's forecasted to go strongly negative over the next 5 to 7 days, the 21st to the 25th, 26th, 27th. It's going to be 2 to 3 standard, even almost 4 standard deviations below normal in its negative phase, which is very bullish to push the cold air into the Great Lakes as we get on towards the Thanksgiving week, like we've been alluding. And then if we look into the future, all the way into December, the Western Pacific Oscillation is forecasted to stay negative for the next 14 days, which is very bullish for maybe an Arctic outbreak to come in as we open up December, which would be one of the colder starts to December we've had, if it does verify, in maybe the last 10 years. We'll look at that. I'll look up that and post some weather maps later on tonight or tomorrow showing you how the last 10 Decembers have turned out and what this December could turn out to be. And then the PNA is the one flying the ointment right now. It's still 3 standard deviations below in its negative phase, and that's a bullish, bearish for cold air and bullish for warm air. And a negative PNA or Pacific North American Oscillation argues for a trough out west and a ridge out east, but you can see it dips slightly positive for a few days, and then it's forecasted to dip back negative. So that's going to be fighting with the WPO and EPO. So that's why I think after we get past the 10th of December, we're going to go back and forth in the month. You have a few days warm, a few days cold, and it's going to be a flip-flop unless we can get this Pacific North American Oscillation to go strongly positive. If we can get a negative WPO, a negative EPO, and correlate that and trifecta that with a positive PNA, you would have a severe Arctic outbreak coming in December. But as of now, we're going to have cold Canadian air come in to end the month, and maybe our first brief Arctic shot of the season come in as we open up December. And some fun and games would be along with that, as a negative WPO and a negative EPO would force the storm track farther south with cold air in place, would have all kinds of fun and games the first 10 or 12 days of December, where we could hopefully have some snow. And this is starting to line up beautifully with what we thought was going to happen. And that's why we're your science and fact-based weather forecasting system, unlike these other social media hype-based clickbait material that just try to get views. We try to get you prepared for the current weather, the upcoming pattern, and future pattern, along with the gold standard and snowfall predicting, because we use science and fact-based. And that's why we are bar none the best amateur meteorologist here on social media with our page. And we thank you and appreciate your support. Comment down below and let me know what cities you guys are from, what kind of winter you're expecting. If you're an ice fisherman or skier or a snowplow company, let me know, and I'll keep you out ahead of upcoming snowstorms, prepare you for the plowing that you're going to need to do, and keep you out ahead of all this type of stuff that's going on. And if we take a look at the Northern Hemisphere and we go into our surface pressure patterns, what we want to see in our surface pressure patterns are the reds and the oranges to build across the west coast of the United States, up into western Canada, and up over top of Alaska and northwest Canada, and that would block the Pacific air because you have a clockwise flow around the high pressure, and that would force a northwest flow draining in cold air from northern Canada and Alaska and Siberia down into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, and force the storm track much, much farther south than we've seen the last few winters and recently so far this year, and run storms into the southern plains, into the Ohio Valley, and into the Northeast, and which would put us on the cold side of things. And if you look right now, November 18th, 19th, 20th, look at that big horseshoe over the top where you got nice big ridging from the Greenland block hooking around all the way up into northwest Canada and Alaska, and then trying to sneak its way down into into the west coast. But you can see we still have storms crashing into the west coast, and that's going to keep the cold air from being too severe until we can see that flip and set up a nice block in the western part of the country. And you can see as we end November, you get where there used to be a big area of trough of low pressure and blues and greens. Notice that high pressure now sitting just off the coast of California. We would like it to sneak on a little bit closer to the coast, and but that effectively blocks the Pacific air, and that can allow the cold air to drain down. As you see the first week on December the 3rd, a big cold Arctic eye coming down into the central plains, into the Great Lakes, which could bring the first Arctic air mass of the season if these things keep in line with what they're going. And you can see now on your 360 hour, you can see the Barney colors showing up as you get a nice big displacement of cold air that's been building in Western Canada. If we look back here, you can see it building in Western Canada November 18th, like we've been talking about. From about 7 to 10 days ago, you're going to start to get cold air building in Western Canada. And then as the EPO switches, it's going to get forced down and pushed down into the central and eastern part of the country as we approach the latter third of the month and start the month of December. And you can see that there, below normal temperature starting to come in to effect as we work our way into the end of the month and Thanksgiving to the first maybe 7 to 10 days of December. And if we go into our long range forecast, and then we'll time out the system for tonight and the upcoming system this week. But if we go into the European weeklies, let's take a look at, this shows you a 7-day surface pressure mean. And you can see how you have all that nice dark reds and even what looks like a white color up there. And that's all high pressure. And that's what we like to see. The fly in the ointment with the negative Pacific North American oscillation is you see the Pacific Northwest, and just off the coast, you see a bunch of greens, dark greens and blues. That's a big area of low pressure, and that's what we need to fizzle and push out of there and get the higher than normal heights to replace the lower than normal heights. And you want to see lower than normal heights where you see this blue back there. You want to see that it's a negative WPO when you have lower than normal heights or blue and green back out to the west of Hawaii, and then you have big area of high pressure or higher than normal heights up over Alaska, northwest Canada, That's indicative of a negative WPO and a negative EPO. And then if we look at the 7-day period ending the 26th to the 3rd, you can see we start to build down the ridge, stretching from Alaska to northwest Canada, and now starting to put a little block on the Pacific air down in western uh, half of the country in California and down the West Coast. And that's going to allow, as we open up December, for the cold air to push. And then you can see the first week of December, you can see this is beautiful. I couldn't draw it up better. You got a nice block over Greenland, hooking around over Alaska, a high pressure or higher than normal heights along the West Coast, and then areas of low pressure or areas of Arctic high pressure streaming in from Alaska down the central and western Canada into the upper Midwest and into the southeast, which will put reinforcing shots of cold air, potentially Arctic air for the first time this season. And you can see as we work our way through week 2 and week 3, this would be December 10th to December 17th. So the second and a half week of December, and we still have that block over the top, keeping the fun and games going. And then as we look into week 3, getting closer to Christmas week, it starts to break down a little bit, but you still have the West Coast with the higher than normal heights, which are blocking the Pacific air, blunting the storm track and forcing the storm track up and around it and pushing it either up and around it into Alaska and down with some clippers, or forcing the subtropical jet beneath that block, streaming in through the Four Corners out into Texas and then up the East Coast. And then as we work our way in towards the end of December, that block starts to push off the coast a little bit, which starts to get a little more bearish for the cold air. But all in all, this is setting up the stage and lining up beautifully with what we've been forecasting, a cold end of the month and a potential cold December for the first time in a while. And we've been lining you up with this for the last 7 to 10 days now. And if we look at the surface temperatures in a 7-day mean pattern, you can see where we're at on the control run, or the assembles, the extended European ensemble members. You can see the cold air building, and you see we start warm the 18th to the 25th, but the 29th to the December 6th, you can see that cold air starts to push. And then all the way through the 10th to the 17th, it's still there. And if we look at the control run, these models don't see the cold air as you work your way into the future. But look at this, the first 10 days of the month of December. That's beautiful, right? And then we'll work our way from there after we get past week 2 and week 3 and try to figure out what's going on. But the models often do like to warm things up too quick and break a pattern. But this is setting up very nicely, and I like what I'm seeing here. And if we look at our 32-day snowfall totals, and we're going to zoom this into the United States, and we go into the weeklies with the ensemble members, you can see that looks very nice. It's pushing the snow farther south and farther east over to the Great Lakes with some Arctic air would get the lake effect snow machine fired up. But now let's time out this system that's moving in our short term, the HHR high resolution rapid refresh model. You can see we got a snowstorm going to take place up in western Minnesota and North Dakota, and that's going to be the surface low pressure that bombs out, becomes negatively tilted, and then gets cut off, and it pinwheels around the eastern Great Lakes for a few days, and we're going to have to contend with on and off again rain showers. But tonight, like we were talking about the other day, 6 p.m., we already have light rain moving into the southwest corner of the state. We work our way in towards midnight as the surface area low pressure gets into northwest Iowa along the elevated warm front pushing from southwest to northeast. You can see the rain around midnight starts to get into the southern and southwestern upper peninsula and northwestern lower peninsula. And that's where the heaviest rain is going to be in central and western upper Michigan. And then all across southern lower Michigan, there will be some light to moderate rain, but it'll be lighter than what's going to happen up in upper peninsula Michigan. And then it moves out about 10 p.m. Between 7 and 10 p.m. tomorrow night. It should pretty much clear the state and have a brief dry period before the next upper level low starts to form and causes all sorts of different types of precipitation and maybe our first snowflakes of the season, dustings of the season, and then some scattered lake effect snow showers. And if we look at our precipitation for the next 24 hours, you can see anywhere from a quarter to a half an inch across the southern and central parts of upper Michigan, and then a quarter to a third of an inch elsewhere in upper Michigan. And then lower Michigan, western Michigan, maybe a quarter to a third of an inch of rain, maybe an isolated area a little bit more around or just northwest of Grand Rapids. And then in eastern and southeast Michigan, roughly a tenth to a quarter of an inch of rain is forecasted. And then before I let you go here, we're going to time out, and I'll get a snowfall map put out for you tomorrow, as our first snowfall map for the lower peninsula is going to be needed. As you can see, you're going to have the next area of low pressure that we were showing you a few days ago form across the lower part of Michigan and then start to pinwheel around. And as it pinwheels around, especially at night, as colder 850 millibar temperatures form, you're going to start to see snow uh, periodically go from rain to snow and then snow to rain, especially overnight. The ground's still warm, so it's going to be hard to get a lot of accumulation, except where it snows a lot or gets heavy if you get into a period of heavier snow. But over the next few days, you're going to have on and off again snow and rain showers. Like, subscribe, and share. Peace and love to my beautiful audience.